Hello friends, for today's video I want to do a non-spoiler review for the Sevenwaters trilogy. This is something that ever since I picked up book 1 I have fallen head over heels in love with. I adored book 1 and then I devoured books 2 and 3, thought they were fantastic, and I was thinking I would just leave it at the review I did for book 1, but part of why I wanted to talk about the series as a whole is because there are a few factors. First off, the structure of the series is a little bit different than what we typically find in trilogies. Second, if you are somebody who tends to have similar tastes to me, this is written in a way that is a little bit different from what I typically really love. So for example, it's first person over the course of all 3 books. You also find that every single book follows a different character. It doesn't have a really intricate magic system, and it's a little bit more contained than a lot of my other favorites. And despite that, though, I still really loved it because I feel like the writing was wonderful, the world building was great, and it also was one of those stories where it's a little bit more of a intimate follow of a character. It reminded me in a lot of ways of the same reasons people really love the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. There's just something about it that really digs into the imperfections of who we are and how a lot of our views about things are going to be impacted by our environments, and as such, if you really create a well-established environment, then it feels all the more immersive. There's just so many things about this that I thought were great, so I wanted to ensure that there was a place dedicated to a discussion for this, but also I have found that it doesn't quite reach that classic status because it's not quite old enough, and a lot of times when a lot of us are getting maybe a little bit fatigued of modern fantasy, or maybe we want to go back and see the kinds of works that have influenced modern fantasy, we will go back past a certain point that this does not cross into. Additionally, this came out at a time that for some of us, we maybe were too young to have picked it up. So when I say some of us, I mean reviewers or people on booktube, people on book talk. So there are certain things that have had a resurgence in popularity, or that people, maybe you have a favorite from when you were younger and you bring that to the table when you talk about books. And so there are certain things that we kind of continuously hype up. And this came out at a time period where it doesn't have the classic status and it doesn't have the people were reading this that are now reviewing books online status, and so I just feel like it's going to continue to sit in this in-between and not have as much attention given to it and have as many eyes on it when I think it really not only deserves it, but so many of the conversations that we have had about what we're looking for in our fantasy, it fulfills, and I know so many of you are going to really, really like this series, so I wanted to ensure that I actually had a dedicated discussion for it. This is going to, as I said at the beginning, maintain non-spoiler status, so I won't be getting into the specifics of the plots overall, but I am going to give information that hopefully allows for you to decide if it sounds like something that works for you or not. On that note, this is not going to work for a lot of individuals because it has a very specific kind of setting and way of telling the story. So as always, my aim is to ensure that you have the information you need to decide if it's something you want to pass on or something you want to check out. I think that it's important that works find their audience, and I don't want people to give it a try just because I liked it. I want you to give it a try if it sounds like something that you would enjoy or that maybe is outside of what you typically get into but still sounds good to you. I'm actually going to start with the things that I think could be a dissuading factor for whether or not you'd want to pick it up. First off, it is within each book only a single perspective. I know a lot of people in fantasy, especially epic works or series, like when there are multiple perspectives because it means that you are going to have a lot of various different characters. If you don't love the one character, it's fine because you maybe will love a different individual, and you can approach various different aspects of the world and the plot from different angles, and especially when you're talking about having important things within your story, whether it's thematic pieces or commentary, you like having various perspectives on those things because it makes it feel like you're really digging in a lot deeper than you would if you only had one single perspective. This is not necessarily that kind of story. So within the first book, you follow a character named Serica, and then in books 2 and 3, you are following different individuals of different generations, and the thing that ties them all together is this place known as Sevenwaters. This place is very much influenced by the lore, so if you are somebody who really likes historical fantasy, this one really fits it, but that does mean that the fantasy elements aren't going to play a huge role, and also this isn't necessarily an entirely new, intricate world. So you don't have the multiple perspectives that a lot of people really enjoy within each book. You have different characters from book to book, but within each individual book, you only follow one person, and I know a lot of people like having that cast of characters. You have a world that is basically our world. It's historical fiction, Britain, Ireland, and you don't get to have this really cool rules and limitation style of magic system. You don't have a magic system that feels scientific. You have a magic system that, especially in book 2, barely feels present. And I wouldn't even call it a magic system if I'm being honest. It's more of just some beings have some powers, and as a result, some humans that live in that area kind of sort of get those powers too. And I know that those softer, more whimsical, lore-based magics are not for everyone. They want to be able to see, okay, well, this person's powerful right now, but the stakes are higher because you know that if this thing goes wrong, then they can't cast this spell or they can't use this power or something like that. Not that kind of a story. A third factor is the pacing of all of these. I was always invested. I was always intrigued. I always wanted to turn the page. I would not, however, call these fast-paced by any stretch of the imagination. They are much, much slower. For me, this really worked because it really allowed us to be immersed in the environment, and it also followed more so the feeling of what the characters experience in their lives. That kind of historical feel, I think, goes hand in hand oftentimes with something that is a little bit slower, because then you feel like you are experiencing life alongside them. And even just the way that the environment was done, the setting was done, it's almost like you wanted to be there with them. So I didn't feel like I was ever bored. I liked the pacing, but it is not action-packed. It is very much we're going to slowly develop things. It's about small interactions between characters. It's about characters contemplating what they're going to do, other characters doing things that ultimately influence these characters over here. And I have compared the first book to the Farseer trilogy. I still think that that is an apt comparison. I actually didn't love the Farseer trilogy, but I totally understand why so many people do really, really love it. And I think that there's a decent chance that if you like aspects or even just love the Farseer trilogy, you will like at least some aspects of this series as well. However, I think that the fact that you have the different perspectives over the course of each book means that you're not going to have that extremely deep character development. So the pacing is interesting in that you will follow a character for a decent amount of time, like a few years of their lives within a single book, which is going to make it a little slower than you get in other stories. But at the same time, it's not quite that slow, deep character analysis that something like Farseer is, where it goes over the course of a whole trilogy. And then you can extend that and even say, if you want to talk about Realm of the Elderlings overall, where it's like this really long thing over the course of a person's entire life. So it's not quite that level, but regardless, it's something in between. And I think if you were somebody, this does go hand in hand with pacing. If you're somebody who loves like high stakes, action-packed stories, not what this is. Not what this is. I love political intrigue. I wouldn't even say that that's what is going on here. There is intrigue, certainly, but not quite on the level that most people think of when they hear the term political intrigue. You could argue it's political for them, because you'll have a character who's kind of like an Irish chieftain or something, or somebody who holds a decent amount of influence in the area. And so they'll talk about matches that would make sense, like this character marrying this character and how that's a good match. And that is somewhat political in nature. But I think usually when we think political fantasy, we think rulers who have sway over the lives of thousands of people. And it really is more contained to like some of the people that live in this small area. So pacing, perspective, and setting, not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And if that's you, then I hope that it was helpful to know that this maybe isn't something that you want to check out. But if you like historical fantasy, if you like deep character analysis, and if you like stories that just allow you to be immersed in the world, it builds kind of in a slower way, this is probably going to work for you. Another compliment I have to give this is that the writing is gorgeous. And it is first person, and I think that we have this perception that first person is always going to be a little bit more casual. Not the case. The writing in this is so beautiful. I think that the descriptions are extremely lush. The environments are really well established as a result of the descriptions, and the emotional aspects of the stories as well. I feel like she describes in a way that is not at all purple, in my opinion. There's a passage within book 2 where a character, somebody in the book, dies. and how the character is reflecting on moving on in life after that person is no longer in their life was devastating. And I was gonna read it to my husband, this passage, and I had to like type it out because I had to, in case he ever reads it, I had to take out the character's name. But I had to type it out and have him read it because I was like, if I read this out loud, I'll probably start crying, especially if you've ever lost a loved one. And it's not even like that was the focus of the book. It's just she has a way of tapping into something that feels like it's a part of the very, as cheesy as this sounds, like fabric of who we are. It just has a way of cutting into it. And I know this is going to sound goofy, but for those of us that like to go out in nature, and there's that feeling that you have when you're in this really serene, beautiful place, and you can feel the coolness of the air, and you can hear the rustling of the leaves, and there's just something very, very tranquil about when you're in this beautiful, lovely part of nature. That feeling is present throughout. It's gorgeous, and I would love, even though this is a little bit of a side tangent, but I would love for this to get an adaptation because it actually, I think, would work really exceptionally well if it were to be adapted. Something else tied to the setting, though, and this is a tougher thing to read about at times, but also it's something that I think allowed for the author to have very, very quiet resilience built into her characters, is that they are young women, and there are a lot of aspects to this historical period in which our books are based in that are oppressive to women, and also that really showcase the lack of agency. You also have the very uncomfortable fact that when we're talking about the potential matches and marriages between characters, we're talking about characters as young as 15 years old, and that is very uncomfortable to sit with. And so you're looking at these girls who are very, very young that are trying to wrestle with the violence of powerful people around them. And sometimes those powerful people come from their own family, sometimes they come from rival families, sometimes they come from what feels like some kind of magical being that is playing with the fate of their lives, and then sometimes it has to do with a sorcerer. There is, if you don't know, in the first book, it is kind of like a grim fairy tale retelling. But regardless, you have these powerful people at play, and you have these young women who are just trying to navigate life through that. And what they're fighting for is so different from what we typically see in fantasy, because I do love this other form of what we are exploring, but so often it's like the fate of the world, that kind of a thing. And I love a good epic story that does that kind of thing. But in this, what they're fighting for is the ability to have happiness in their lives, which it's almost like a precursor to cozy fantasy, but also not cozy. It's beautiful, and I feel lost in the worlds when I'm reading these books, but it is not like a comforting, lovely type of story. It's actually very bittersweet and hard-hitting at times, and it really tackles, when you're looking at these young women in this time period, the ownership that people feel over them, the very unfortunate assault that occurs at times, or that occurs to other people that they know, and the repercussions of this. I do feel like this author took a great deal of care with how she approached this, not just in the first book where it is the most prevalent, but also how that carries into the following books as well. But returning to the point of the thing that these characters are fighting for is the ability to live their lives with some semblance of happiness. They maybe want to be with somebody that they care for and that is their friend and that they want to have a life with. They maybe want to have children, but they don't want somebody else to have a say over that, or they don't want somebody else to have control over that. And I think it is very, very fitting of the historical environment to have this. And also it has a way of kind of balancing out fantasy with real world things. And even though it's based in a different time and there are magical aspects at play, it's something so many of us can relate to, of like, I want to live life on my terms. And how difficult that is in a society that has other people that not only feel they have ownership over you, but it's so built into their entire system and the entire foundation of their society. The first trilogy does sort of kind of conclude a certain arc that persists over the course. So you're going to have an established setting that is true for all three books. You're going to have characters from the first one that you're going to see show up in the second one, and then characters from first and second appear in the third. The consequences of certain actions are going to persist over the course of the trilogy. So you're going to have these things, even though the characters themselves change. But the overall arc and some of the greater threats, they conclude by the end of the trilogy. But there are other books that take place after this, so if you do like these 3 books, there are others you can read. And also if you're somebody who maybe you just don't have the time to read books back to back to back, they each do read very strongly like standalones. You can read the first one, wait a little while, then pick up the second one, read that, wait a little while, read the third. It's not really going to, I personally think, diminish, because there are some stories where if you forget even a little bit, it's going to impact what you think later on. And I feel like these do a good job of allowing you to consume the one story and then consume the next one when it is available to you to do so. I also quite enjoyed the characterization in general. I think that the author found a way to balance that feeling of growing up, of having a distinct personality, of bucking against the system, but also accepting when you have to be a part of it, or for your own safety, you just have to acquiesce. I feel like there was a good balance of that, and how at times that can be very difficult depending on your personality type, or how other times certain personality types, they just so badly want to stick to quiet and safety. And so there's a lot of complexities tied into that and a lot of nuance tied into that, because sometimes when we're reading things that are more historical in nature, we are like, oh no, you should push back against that. But then you're like, well, that's not realistic. Or you think like, how could they think that about their sister? Or how could they think about this person in this way? And you're like, well, of course they think like that, because that's the environment that is constantly surrounding them. And so watching them grow and develop, whether it's through relationships with their family members, relationships with other people, romantic relationships, friendships that develop, I think all of this kind of, you slowly watch these characters change and reshape, and how their personalities fit into that, I think was very exquisitely done. But they're not perfect characters by any means. They are not these characters that are just empty either and are able to be a reader insert. I think they are all distinct, they're all realistic, and they're all flawed. That's it though for this non-spoiler discussion of the Sevenwaters trilogy. If you have any of your own thoughts you'd like to provide, feel free to do so. And if you are interested in checking these out, I'll have them linked. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.